What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com, the Hook'em Horn Show. Come back at y'all today. It's been a few weeks, at least, since the last video, but it's, encroaching on springtime and March Madness right around the corner here, so I'll be a little bit more active with hoops content here in the coming weeks and months. But yeah, wanted to give you all a quick update on, Texas basketball season. As we're recording this, Texas is at halftime against Arkansas, so down 11 points right now. We'll see how that game finishes out. But excluding the first half of the Arkansas game, Texas has looked, I think, pretty good over the past 3 weeks. Really, since the OU game, they've won 4 of their past 6, 3 of the last 4 in SEC play, including 2 straight ranked wins at home at the Moody Center. Tonight, I think the first half could have some consequentiality to it. The Caden Shedrick back injury, we'll see how that plays out because, it's early reporting, but back spasms, he's questionable to return tonight. The reason why I say that that could be more of a long-term injury to watch is, that the back spasms, if you remember, some of the games early last season, I don't know about 2 years ago, but he's dealt with that injury and a shoulder injury throughout his career for the past three seasons, 3.5, if you consider back at the time of Virginia. Anyway, hopefully he is okay because we already got Kendall Weaver out. Kaluma's been back for the last couple of games, so that's good on the injury front. But anyway, Shane, how are you feeling about the team with, about 8 games left in the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, it's been up and down to say the least. I think looking at the schedule, you look at the non-con, open up against Ohio State, it's a tough loss. Losing to UConn at home, nothing to be ashamed about. Huskies obviously aren't as good this year as they were the past 2 years. But then you get into the SEC play, and those first 5 games were a gauntlet. We talked about this offline, but it was how many wins in those first 5 were Texas fans going to be happy with. And I think we were both hoping for 2. It turned out they got 1, which was at Oklahoma, losing at A&M against Auburn, Tennessee, and at Florida. But since then, 3 and 4, played Ole Miss right down to the wire in Oxford. So I think the team's starting to put it together. I think we both have clearly had questions about Rodney Terry and, his ability to have sustained success in Austin. But one thing I will say in favor of RT is that his teams do get better throughout the season. And I think that's a byproduct of, not only the staff and his coaching, but when you're meshing all these new players together, it's just going to take time. I think that's kind of the day and age we're in college basketball, especially when you have a ball-dominant freshman like Trey Johnson. Everyone's kind of got to figure out how to play off of him and play around him. But we've seen Tremont Mark come into his own, best game of the season against LSU last Saturday. Jordan Pope has had some good games, and obviously Kaluma's been really good as well. So I think this team has the talent to win a couple NCAA tournament games, but what really kills them is the consistency, and we're seeing that in the first half against Arkansas. I mean, you look at the LSU game in the second half, they were dominant. Granted, that was against an LSU team that's not very good, but you look to the A&M game where they came back from 20 down in the second half, dominant. You look to the Oklahoma game in the first half where they jumped out to a big lead, dominant. But those games also had very poor halves as well. So I think this team is just lacking consistency and sometimes effort at times, which is a little bit concerning. But I think everything is still out in front of you, especially in league play. SEC is so tough this year. You kind of got your hard games out of the way, but you're still going to have a lot of quad one opportunities to finish the year, which is good on one hand because you can really boost a resume, bad on the other because, a little bit of a skid could cost you. So I would say all in all, after the first, 22 games of the season, I think Texas is right around where I thought they would be, maybe a little below what we had projected coming into the season, but we all knew that this wasn't going to be a team that was, competing for a top 4 seed or anything like that. So, kind of on the inside of the cut line right now seems about right for what we expected.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep coming back to the game tonight because it is one game, and it's a quad two game. It's not even a quad one, and most of the games Texas plays in the SEC this year are quad one. Um, the reason why I keep coming back to this one is that if Texas does lose this game, it would be their first. It would be their first quad two loss. So
Technically, the UConn game is a quad two loss because they're like 31 in the net.
oh, they are.
And that was at home.
Yeah.
But
right.
that by the end of the year, that will be a quad one loss because I think UConn's gonna come into their own. But I totally hear you. I think it'll be the first game they lose outside the Ohio State game where they've been favored.
Yeah, they've been good against the spread this year. I think 13-8. And the one thing that I keep coming back to with this team, you look at the schedule and there's been frustrations with Rodney Terry this year, but especially because in the non-con, outside I think of the NC State win, you won against St. Joe's and Syracuse, but it really wasn't until the Mizzou game where I really felt like, oh, Texas had a good, complete victory over a solid tournament team. OU, you won that game, you won it on the road, but you coughed up a big lead in the second half. The A&M game, impressive comeback. LSU, probably the most complete game of the season, and to do that on the road was big. If you lose to Arkansas tonight, that's a little bit of a step back. See how you're doing, because you got a few. I look at the schedule for the rest of the season, and I see 4 wins. Again, assuming you stay healthy. I see 4 wins as the floor. Assuming you stay healthy, because I think the team is trending in a good direction right now. I just don't think you should be losing. I mean, again, see how tonight goes, but you shouldn't you shouldn't lose tonight, but you shouldn't be losing even on the road against South Carolina. You should not be losing at home against Georgia. And then you have a winnable game this weekend against Vanderbilt. So maybe 3. I'd say 3 is probably the floor.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you're 7-11 in SEC play, I think you're going to be firmly on the bubble. But I do think you'd probably be on the right side because you would have beaten a fair amount of NCAA tournament teams. Texas, I believe right now does have 4 quad one wins. And so after a couple more, if you do get to 7 wins in the conference, you'd have 6 or 7 quad one wins. I think 8 and 10, you're 100% in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it depends on the games you win. Like if you beat Alabama, even though it's at home, if you beat Alabama, even if you have 7 wins in conference play, you're good. If you beat Mississippi State on the road, wouldn't be as big of a win, but Mississippi State will probably be in the top 25 at that time. They've been a hard team to knock out in Starkville this year. So those are the 2 games. I think those are the only 2 quad one games remaining. We'll see what Vanderbilt's net ranking looks like.
Kentucky should be.
Oh, Kentucky. Yeah, I skipped over that one. That's my bad.
Pretty much any road game
Except
in the
3.
SEC is pretty much any road game in the SEC is going to be quad one, besides at South Carolina, because I believe in the net it's 1 through 75 on the road.
It was 1 through 50. Okay.
1 through 50 neutral.
1 through 50 neutral. That's
keep an eye on St. Joe's because I think they're like 74 right now. I doubt they can climb up into the top 50, but that could always boost a resume.
My spreadsheet here is a little bit out of date. I'm looking at I have Ken Palm and net on here and my average ranking, and I've got St. Joe's at 82 on the net, but that was from Monday, so things could have changed. I've got South Carolina at 77 in Ken Palm, 74 in net. I don't know why I'm just naming it off when I could just look online, but yeah. Anyway, you're right. These are borderline quad one games. Also, again, in the SEC, lower quad one, higher quad two. If it really comes down to it, that matters. Mostly pick up maybe 4 wins, at least 10 out the regular season, get 1 SEC tournament win, and you're there.
Yeah.
That's the thing, too. You got to remember we still got the SEC tournament coming up. I also think OU at home. Rodney Terry, man, he's just owned OU. Undefeated. Is it 7-0?
Yeah, and I think we've won our last 11 against OU, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that. It's crazy because OU's had some good teams the last
Yeah.
few years. Um, yeah. You're right. That Kentucky game, Kentucky's been up and down and mostly
Hmm.
down lately. But, Georgia is a weird team. I think the only two games that really do scare me down the stretch that Texas could lose. I guess I feel good. I feel pretty good about the Kentucky game, again, assuming you're healthy, but Alabama and then Mississippi State on the road. So let's do this. At this point, who are your two team MVPs? Who has surprised you the most? And then what do you think will be Texas's biggest? You know what? I'll go ahead and start with that. And then I've got one other question we'll get to.
Okay.
So yeah, the two team MVPs, who surprised you the most? Then one other thing. And then we'll talk about like SEC tournament picture, what we think Texas's record will look like in the NCAA tournament. For
Perfect. So,
me,
oh,
yeah,
you
you know
know,
what?
you name one, I'll name one. We'll do a little back and forth.
Okay. Um, for the entire season, I do think the most complete player for the team has been Arthur Kaluma. Um, Trey Johnson, I think, is probably the easy answer, and probably would be my number two. But I'll be honest, I think Arthur Kaluma has been your glue. I think you saw in the first half of the A&M game what life was kind of like without Arthur Kaluma. And then they kind of, picked up the energy in the second half, which is hopefully what Texas does over the next, 45 minutes, give or take, tonight. Without Caden Shedrick. Is Shedrick back in the game yet?
I have it on mute. The sideline reporter talked to RT, so maybe it's on Twitter what he said, but I'm unsure.
He's not on the court right now, and we still
Yeah.
got Onyema, so I'm guessing not. Anyway, you kind of saw in that A&M game what life looks like without Kaluma. You had guys really pick up the pace in that game. Really, one guy, Trey Johnson, who had a career high 30 and really, drove Texas to victory in that one. And then you had the, last second bucket from Tremont Mark. But Arthur Kaluma is, there's things that he's doing this year that have kind of picked up the pace. I kind of noticed this the other day. I was looking at some of the off-ball scoring numbers. He's done a lot of what Dylan Dessou did last year, just in lower doses. Among Texas's forwards, he has the most catch and shoot threes this season. He's shooting 3-point field goals at the highest percentage Texas has had in the 2020s of any big man beside Dylan Dessou. Not to mention, he's blown out his career numbers out of the water for shooting percentages this season, over 50% from the field, close to 50% from beyond the arc. I think he's at 45. Rebounding career high there too. 1 steal, 1 block. I think he's done a decent job facilitating the offense from inside the arc too. In SEC play, he ranks 3rd on the team in assists per game at 2, which isn't a ton, but again, for a team that kind of mentioned it at time has struggled to move the ball and really show good effort on both ends of the floor, having those additional guys that can help you run the offense from different spots on the floor is incredibly valuable. And just hands down, I think he's been the team's best rebounder. I think Shedrick has shown a lot of effort this year, but Kaluma's been the guy, man. 8 rebounds per game. So, it speaks for itself. So that's mine.
Yeah, and just kind of a thought on Kaluma. I completely agree with you there. And that last point on his rebounding, he's been a monster on the glass. A lot of double-digit rebound games. And I also think his rebounding helps the offense because when Shedrick and Onyema grab a defensive board, they're not looking to push it and run in transition. It would be through the outlet pass through those two guys. But even then, they're kind of squaring the elbows, looking around and taking time. And so then Texas is immediately in the half court. Where when Kaluma grabs it, he can either take off with the dribble or he's looking to the outlet right away. So I think him being active on the glass is also big for transition offense and for an offense that can sometimes stick and get a little ISO based in the half court. I think running in transition has been huge. But I'm going to say the obvious, Trey Johnson. You can only imagine what this team would look like without Trey Johnson this year. Averaging 19 a game, which is tops in the SEC, I believe, and in the top 5 for freshmen across the country. He takes some ill-advised shots, but you got to live with that. He's the most gifted scorer since maybe KD. Jacobin Brown, maybe. I love watching Jordan Hamilton score the basketball, but his numbers were nowhere near Johnson's. But he can really just create a shot at any point in time and really, single-handedly bring Texas back into games like you mentioned against A&M that second half. So I think he's just been great, exactly what we needed, exactly what this team needed. I think he's got a lot of like alpha dog in him. When someone tests him on the defensive end, he goes right at him. That can get him in trouble at times, but I think that's what you live with the number one option. So I think everything about Trey Johnson has been exactly what we could have hoped for during his time on the 40. And, not a super apt comparison, but just given how much talent he has, I can't help but think and be a little concerned like this could almost be a Bijan Robinson type thing where you have this generational talent on the 40 acres and you waste it with, a team that, didn't help him out, never in a big bowl game for Bijan and for Trey, maybe not in the tournament or maybe a one and done. I think that would be really unfortunate given his scoring ability, but he can take over games and that's what you need at the college level. And that's what you need with an offense that often becomes stuck. So, and also shout out him at the line has been absolute nails, especially down the stretch. I live up in the New York area, so I went to the Syracuse and St. Joe's game, and in both games he struggled from the field, but was absolute ice from the line. Didn't miss a free throw down the stretch, so that's big time too from a freshman. And like I said, I don't even want to imagine where this team would be without his scoring prowess this year.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten much help in other areas of the floor for Texas. Texas has other scorers, but we lack interior post presence, big men. I almost think it's a symptom a little bit of leftover from Chris Beard. Chris Beard teams never really rebounded the ball well at Texas, and they lacked size on the inside. You had last year for Texas was Shedrick and Dessou, but it seemed like they were never really healthy at the same time, both dealing with injury issues last year. Yeah, Trey Johnson having a rough night tonight, but, scores do what scores do. You're not going to be on every single night. And again, Texas with other injuries right now, it's a little bit of a struggle right now. Arkansas's defense kind of suffocating them. For the other question I had here and where I wanted to go next, who the player that surprised you the most? I'll let you start on that.
I think I'm going to have to go with Devon Pryor.
Went with who I was going to choose. So
yeah. I figured if you look down the roster, not to go super macro here, but besides Johnson and Kaluma, I think it's fair to say that the rest of the rotation is kind of underachieved what we were hoping for coming into the season. And Pryor, we didn't know how he was going to be used. And, to start the year, it was pretty sparingly. But RT has turned to him in conference play, especially the last 5 games or so. In the last 3, he's played 14, 16, and 21 minutes. And he's just been a spark plug off the bench. His energy is infectious. He hustles. He's good on the defensive end. He's a willing rebounder. And, he's been able to knock down some shots too, whether it's like a 1 or 2 dribble pull up or a spot up 3. Over the last 3 games when he has gotten his most run of the season, he's 9 for 13 from the field and 1 for 2 from 3. So, I think Pryor is a player that you need to have in your program. because you can't just solely rely on the transfer portal. Like, this is a developmental piece, looking to the future. He's a sophomore this year, redshirt freshman. Hopefully he hangs around, another 2 years, and really, by the time he's a senior, I think could be a leader, a starter, a 12 to 14 point per game scorer. So I really like what I've seen from him this season.
Yeah, I mean, he was the obvious choice for me. I have another one that I can go with here. I think for Pryor, it's definitely not a direct comparison, but I almost think, and obviously it's not a direct comparison for both these guys, but in various ways, I think you hope he becomes kind of like a Brock Cunningham or an Andrew Jones, where you got these multi-year guys that can develop into starters or very key role players for you. And, Andrew Jones, his last year at Texas was his last 2 years at Texas, he was a good scorer, a good shooter, always was a good shooter. But, for, I think for Cunningham, he became the best 3-point shooter on the team for a couple of years there. And Pryor, we'll see. Yeah, he's providing really good defense. Good wing play. Mine is not going to be so much like from the overall body of work as much as it is like the role I think that he's playing for Texas this season, and how he's been able to adjust his game. I've been impressed lately, more specifically by Tremont Mark. I think that Mark has done a really good job playing more off ball. And specifically, I think moving off ball, hitting clutch shots, coming up big in the second half. I think you mentioned it earlier in the video that, he had that 16-point second half against LSU, hit the game-winning bucket against A&M. His usage, though, I've been a fan of how his game has adjusted as the season has progressed. He's had to fight through some adversity this year. Lower body injuries caused him to miss some time earlier in the season. Really had to adjust his role in the rotate. Mark's been a kind of a, primary, secondary ball handler his entire career. We're talking about a guy that shoots, and for over multiple years was double-digit field goal attempt per game sort of guy. And I think right now he is third or fourth on Texas in field goal attempts per game. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, last year at Arkansas, he was at 11.3 field goal attempts. He's down to 8 this year at Texas. But he's really making the most of the opportunities he gets, shooting career high 38.3% from beyond the arc. In SEC plays over 40% from deep. Again, off-ball catch and shoot guys. Texas has been a good 3-point shooting team in most games this year. Mark is, I think, a big reason for that, specifically at SEC play. For about 43% of his field goal attempts this season are 3-pointers. This is the only season he's been over 40%. And so he's been asked to do something that is not easy to get someone that is a 5th-year senior. He was a big-time transfer, to be able to take this backseat and help a team like Texas get in, potentially get into the tournament and play a big role here in March. And, we'll see if Texas can make it to April, but he's been anyway. Yeah, I've been impressed by what he's done.
I agree. And I agree with your point, kind of as of late, obviously started the year injured and has been working his way back. And I think he's really the X factor this season because, Trey's going to get his. Obviously, you mentioned having an off night against Arkansas. Those are going to happen. And when Trey has an off night, can Tremont Mark step up and score 15, 18 points? And when Trey's on, can he supplement that with, 12 points? And I think, having him on and, having a guy like Jordan Pope clicking as well just really opens up the floor for everyone. So, yeah, I think he's my X factor. And if Texas is to have success down the stretch, I think Mark's going to be squarely in the mix.
Yeah, I think Mark is I think it would be the easy one to put the X factor label on, because when he's producing offensively, that really helps Texas from a secondary scoring perspective. I know that this wasn't a category I had mentioned, but I X factor for me, because I kind of reverse it here. I think that Jordan Pope for me is a big X factor, and I'll say why. In every game that Jordan Pope has scored over a dozen points this season, Texas has either won and won big, or has won an impressive game, or not won an impressive game, nearly pulled off a big upset. He really changes the dynamics of games when he's able to put the ball in the basket. 13 points against NC State, including over half of those coming in the second half. Big 4-point win on the road. 17 points against Tennessee, including helping keep Texas in that game throughout. Obviously you had that 42-point just insanity against New Orleans back in non-con, and then 27 against Oklahoma. Texas doesn't win that game if not for those 27 points from Jordan Pope. 19 against Auburn, and again, really helped keep Texas in that game. Those are two of the best teams in the SEC. And so, but lately, Pope has been the one that I've been kind of disappointed by, I would have to say, in the past couple of weeks. He's gone the last 5, looks like it's going to be 6 games in a row without scoring in double figures. I think they need a little bit more out of him. And, I say that, I think the LSU game he played okay. He's been taking more of a back seat, but, he's got, what is it now? Yeah. If you exclude the LSU game in the past 5, he is, my math is failing me, 8 of 35 from the field. That number's got to get better. Specifically from 2-point range, he has struggled badly. So he's one I need to see more out of down the stretch, because Texas needs something from him or Julian Larry at the point guard position, and they just haven't been getting it for most of SEC play. They've really had to overcome that with, the production of Kaluma, Mark, and Trey Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick note on Pope. I think, like you mentioned, he is a pressure cooker. He's kind of all on or all off, which is feast or famine is a tough way to live. But, against New Orleans, and like you mentioned, the second half against Oklahoma, they don't win that game without him. You see what he can look like when he's really good. But, when he's not there, it really hurts the offense. So I think that's a good shout. I also think it's good that he's a junior. So hopefully all but likely coming back next year, because, I do really like watching him play. And I think he would be a key piece down the stretch this season and going into next season. And kind of my last question about the roster, obviously Kendall Weaver, I believe, has missed the last 7 games. Really haven't had much of an update, I don't believe, unless you know something. But I would ask you, how impactful do you think Weaver's return can be if, say, it happens mid-February?
I think that, defensively, he makes a huge impact on the game in transition, second chance points. He does a lot of those. He does a lot of the dirty work that you need. I think when Kendall Weaver first got to Texas a couple of years ago, we thought that he was going to be, a great floor spacer. He was a 40% shooter from 3 at UTA. I believe when was he the WAC freshman of the year?
Yeah.
A few years ago. He's again, another guy that's really changed his game. And, obviously he's got one of the more insane vertical leaps that you'll see in college hoops. And really, I mean, he's a great rebounder for a guy that's 6'3". I think he's averaging around five rebounds per game when he's been healthy this year. Earlier this season, Texas, again, is missing a lot of that secondary support. They need rebounding regardless of who it's coming from. They've lost the rebounding battle in all but 2 games in SEC play. That continues to be an issue for them. One thing I did want to mention about Pope really quickly, I'm going to have a piece coming on the site at some point if he continues, if he kind of continues this cold streak scoring the basketball. He, I think when he's on, he's able to find his mid-range game and he's able to kind of cook from there. He's not a great off-ball scorer. He's shooting 26% on catch and shoot 3-pointers this year. Yeah. Was never really good. He was always in the mid-30s at Oregon State, but I think this year specifically, he's really struggled to adapt to that role when necessary. And I think a little bit of that is heightened competition. I also think a little bit of that has to do with Texas not having the greatest off-ball distributors, or like secondary playmakers and secondaries distributors mainly. Trey Johnson, I think, will get there eventually, but he's not really to the point of being a true facilitator.
Yeah, that'll happen at the NBA level,
Yeah.
unfortunately for Texas fans.
Right. And so, for Jordan Pope, he's one of 3 guys on the team this year that has under 50% of his 2-pointers that are actually, never mind. That's just mid-range and in the paint. Okay, but it's still, I think this actually goes to show even more. 51% of his 2-point field goals are assisted this season. So, he's not a guy that really thrives off moving off ball and getting open. He really initiates the offense. And I think for him, I'd like to see a little bit more of having him move the basketball, let him get into the mid-range, kind of like a Marcus Carr sort of role.
Yeah.
Marcus Carr wasn't a good off-ball scorer either, really. We talked about that a lot between him and Tyrese Hunter, some of that kind of sandpaper on wood sort of relationship. Not to put that super bluntly. Anyway, yeah, but we don't need to talk about how to fix Jordan Pope's game right now. That's a subject for a different day. Just thought I would mention that I think that there's some tweaks that could be made. I mean, I think Rodney Terry's a good coach. He does great work in modifying these players' games during the offseason. And he does a lot with what he has, especially in the wing and back court. But, okay. Knowing that Texas is probably going to lose the game tonight, they're down by 23 points, in the second half. About 13 minutes to go against Arkansas, barring a miracle there. They are done for tonight. Where do you think Texas ends up at the end of the season? How many conference wins, SEC tournament placement, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, not what you're looking for against Arkansas tonight. I think you can take solace in the fact that Texas actually played pretty well this season when their backs were against the wall. I mean, you start conference play 0-3, not, no losses to hold your head down, but that game at Oklahoma was one that you felt you really needed because you're probably going to lose at Florida, and they went out and got it. And then after you drop to Florida, you're 1-4. You have Missouri and A&M at home, and those are 2 good teams, 2 top 15, top 25 teams in the country. And they got them both there too and defended the home floor. So I think Texas is going to bounce back well off of this loss. Caveat there, depending on what happens with Caden Shedrick, because, the front court depth, we covered this in the offseason, not getting Toppin, who ended up going to Tech. The front court depth is non-existent. And if Shedrick is out, that will pose a major issue. But barring full health, I think of the next 3 games, at Vanderbilt, at home against Alabama, at home against Kentucky, I think Texas will win 2 of those. I think Texas finishes the regular season with 8 SEC wins. I'm going 8-10. Maybe a bit conservative, especially predicting 2 of the next 3 go their way. But I think this team is just too streaky to pocket any wins and say that's a clear win. So I'm going 8-10. I think, as we discussed, 8-10 get you in the tournament, and regardless of what you do in SEC play. But say you get 1 game there, I think you're looking at a 9 or a 10 seed, and then who knows? Because we've seen this team hang with some really good teams. Against Auburn and Tennessee, 4-point loss. So you get into the NCAA tournament as a 9 or 10, you win that first toss-up game, and then you're playing one of the top seeds. Who knows? But I'll go 8-10 in SEC play, and I'll predict a first-round exit, unfortunately, with a Sweet 16 ceiling.
First-round exit for the NCAA tournament?
Yep.
Okay.
But I do think that they have what it takes to get to the second weekend.
You too. I mean, depends on how their path shakes out. Last year they had that tough one against Tennessee. I mean, that's the problem. If you're you're a 9 or a 10 seed, you're facing a 1 or a 2.
Yeah.
I think for Texas this year, if you get, the thing for this year is that like it really depends. Like if Texas, there's a big difference between Texas facing that top tier of teams, Auburn, Duke, Houston, Tennessee, or maybe facing like Purdue or Texas Tech, who both could get a 2 seed but are beatable teams, I think, for Texas on a good night. I'm going to go the same as you. I'm going to say 8-10 is the finishing conference play. I think they could pick up one additional win in the SEC tournament to kind of solidify themselves. I'll go as a 9 seed for the NCAA tournament. I'll be honest, I've not been super impressed by the teams kind of in that tier, though. Teams like a Clemson, a BYU, an OU, that would be around that group. So I think Texas can get out of the first round, but you get a 9 seed, you get out of the first round, that puts you up against a 1 seed in the second round. I just don't see that happening. So, we're kind of seeing where the ceiling is playing out for Rodney Terry teams until, I really think until Texas is from the top, I guess not to jump straight into trying to, bash athletic distribution here, but until Texas actually makes a firm financial commitment to Rodney Terry and the Texas basketball program, I think there will be a ceiling on whatever head coach is here. Do I think Rodney Terry is the best coach that's ever been at Texas? We've said this before. No, but I think he does a good amount with what he's got. We'll see next season. I mean, Trey Johnson's going to be gone. Kaluma's going to be gone. Those are your 2 best players. There's you signed John. What was it? John Clark was who's a solid get, but he's gonna have to rebuild through the portal again for the 3rd year in a row, and so I'd assume we're just gonna kind of see this wash, rinse, repeat cycle with Rodney Terry at Texas. And last thing I want to do before we jump off here, because as usual we usually go over with college hoops videos, but
But before we go national, just quick question, quick hypothetical. First round NCAA tournament game, 5 minutes left, tie ball game. Who is fully healthy roster? Who's your 5 that you want out there?
Fully healthy?
Fully healthy. Weaver's healthy. Shedrick's healthy.
Who are we playing?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I can't go that far.
I think Weaver in the tournament is kind of a good ace up your sleeve.
Yeah.
I think you keep him in as your 6th or 7th man in the rotation coming off the bench. I go with Shedrick at the 5, Kaluma at the 4. I just don't like Kent in the starting lineup. He hasn't done enough for me this season. He's had good moments, but yeah. Mark at the 3. Johnson at the 2, and Pope at the 1.
Yep.
You give healthy minutes to, especially Kendall Weaver coming off the bench, Julian Larry. Let me tell you the 2 things I would like to see moving forward. And I've done articles about this season, but I'm happy to see them giving Devin Pryor more minutes. Quick update. Devin Pryor, unfortunately, suffered, it looks like, a calf or ankle injury tonight, so he's out for the rest of the game. Shedrick is back in the game, so that's good. But, we'll see if this is a recurring thing with Shedrick like it was like 18 months ago. Or what was that? Yeah, not even 18 months. What am I saying? Like 2 seasons ago, last season? I'm forgetting. We've had a lot of big men that have unfortunately gotten injured. And so it's been, the big men depth it'll be tested down the stretch. But yeah, the 2 things I want to see more. One, I would like to see them get Nick Cody more minutes. In games like this, I don't think you have much to lose. Throw him out there, see how he does. In some spots, again, he's got a lot of talent. I don't think that you want to just throw him out there all the time, but get him some extra minutes when you're in garbage time in games like this, and see how he does, and see how he's able to score the basketball, how he's able to rebound and protect the rim. The other thing I would like to see a little bit more of, besides kind of the change of usage for Jordan Pope, I just want to see them get into their sets a little bit earlier in the shot clock and push the pace a little bit more in transition. There does seem to be a lack of urgency. Again, I don't mean to always get so numbers nerdy, but it's one of the things I like doing in covering college basketball in the NBA or whatever. Texas this season is averaging their average field goal attempt is with 14 seconds on the shot clock in their last 8 games in SEC play, which is almost all of them. But I specifically wanted to highlight the last, say, 4 weeks here, because we got to be pushing the pace a little bit more. Tonight we got 37 points on the board, and there's 10 minutes left roughly in the second half. Texas can score the basketball, but they're facing some good teams coming up in the SEC, some good defenses. You need to start showing some urgency on the offensive end of the floor. This lineup should have had enough time to gel a little bit more at this point. So those are my 2 things.
Sure, I agree on both fronts. Or 214th in adjusted tempo. Let the guys run. You got an athletic squad. So
weren't they like 80th last year?
That's a good question. I mean, I think Texas teams have Chris Beard, when he came in, he said he wanted to run, but the teams are still always like pretty slow. Never anything close to what Alabama or current Kentucky does. But
yeah, oh yeah, man. Yeah, Kentucky and BYU last year, and yeah, a lot of offense. But yeah, I don't know. Part of me too. I mean, 90s basketball had a place and a time, but it's not really what I want to be watching at this point. But I don't know. That's probably just me sounding like I want to make the game more like the NBA. Anyway, all right, you ready to look at national?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if we said, I know we said it off camera, but I don't know if we'd said it earlier in the video. Beginning of the year, when we did our preseason video, I said my fun pick for the national championship was Iowa State. My serious boring pick was Duke. I think you said Houston was your pick. I don't know if you had like a out there pick.
Yeah, I forget if I did. I couldn't find it, but Houston was my overall pick.
Yeah, and so I guess the fact of the matter is our both of our serious picks are still very much in the mix. In fact, right now, I think both, if the regular season ended today, Duke and Houston would probably both be 1 seeds, if not, 2 seeds at the lowest. Who are you sticking with your national championship pick at this point?
So I think Auburn and Duke are above the rest of the field, personally. But I do like Houston. I think guards win in March. They have a bevy of guards, and then obviously they got Juwan Roberts who can take over games down low. So just for the sake of continuity from November, I will stick with Houston, but I do think Auburn and Duke are kind of on their own pedestal when it comes to the top of the bunch.
Yeah, that's hard to argue with. I'd probably put I guess the one team that I see right now that I don't see Tennessee and Rick Barnes spots. They just don't have the consistent offense. It seems like they always have a letdown at some point before the Final Four. Tech seems like a team that could get hot at the right time. They've been playing really well right now. Arizona kind of fits that mold. Yeah, there are other teams I've been impressed by at different points of the season, but I'm gonna stick with Duke still. I just think that Duke's a pretty well-rounded squad. They, I think they got what you need to win a national championship. The ACC isn't very strong this season, but I think Duke still has a very good chance of just kind of gliding to that 1 seed, especially if they end up winning the ACC tournament. I think they end up having a pretty favorable path. I'm interested to see what Kansas does down the stretch.
Yeah.
We've seen Bill Self teams, especially in recent years, kind of go through some adversity, and usually they come out pretty strong. After, Kansas, you've had depth concerns the last few years. The offense isn't, what it once was. But their win over Iowa State was pretty impressive. Iowa State was my pick. I still think they'll be solid, but they're definitely not trending in the right direction right now. And then I guess if I had a fun pick at this point, just because I like watching their offense, is Gonzaga. I enjoy watching a lot of their best play. Graham EK's real solid. Nemhard, Khalif Battle. It's a good squad. But obviously they have had troubles of their own, losing to St. Mary's the other night.
Yeah. That was a rock fight. That was a good game. I don't think they're in danger of missing the tournament, but just given what you have in the WCC, they've already dropped 3 conference games. Like if they stumbled in 2 more games and you have 5 WCC losses, it could get a little interesting. I definitely don't think they're going to miss the tournament. They'll probably be like a 5 or a 6 seed, but they could start falling their way down the seed line. I do like that they have a high ceiling. I think my kind of off the radar team would be Mississippi State. I think they play with a lot of spunk. Chris Jan's teams, even back to New Mexico State days, always defend really well. And then they have a lighted up scorer in sophomore guard Josh Hubbard, who has the green light when he steps over half court. And he's got a solid cast of characters around him. Keyshawn Murphy, Riley Kugel, RJ Melendez. So I think Mississippi State, could give some teams problems, and I think if they slide in as like a 4 or 5 seed, get to a Sweet 16 and battle a 1, I think that would be a terrific game.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier in the video, I think Mississippi State's a real solid team. Could make some noise. Yeah, that's about all I got.
Yeah, me too. I think, just to wrap it up, the RT experience has had some highs and lows, and tonight, or whenever you're watching this, that Wednesday night Arkansas game, definitely a low. But this team has been resilient this year and has bounced back. So hopefully they can go into Nashville and beat a Vanderbilt team that has looked really good on their home floor, beat Kentucky, beat Tennessee. So, don't take that lightly. Going into Nashville and picking up a win would be big. So
they don't have an easy game necessarily for the rest of the year, like you were saying. Georgia at home probably is the closest thing to it. Maybe South Carolina on the road.
Yeah.
So tonight was honestly probably your easiest game because Arkansas without Boogie Fland, but Arkansas's defense really kind of choked the life out of Texas tonight on the offensive end. Last thing I will ask, do you think the Vanderbilt game is a quote unquote must win at this point of the season, knowing that, we're probably going to have a double-digit loss to Arkansas tonight?
Yeah, I think kind of as the season goes, I would consider it a must-win just because you get Alabama and Kentucky the next week. And so if a loss at Vanderbilt, you could easily look up and have lost 4 in a row 10 days from now. So I think in that case, it is a must-win. However, if they were to drop it, I think, the optimistic outlook would be tough 2 games, but we have a lot of quad 1 opportunities ahead of us. So we can certainly still put together a strong resume. But I think for the case, if we're trying to get to that 8-win SEC number, or maybe even a 9-9, you got to go into Nashville and play well and bounce back. So, yeah, I think,
yeah. Well, we'll see. Maybe Texas can rattle off 16 straight points here in the final 7 minutes. Tie it up against Arkansas. Wishful thinking. All right. Well, we'll have more activity coming up on the YouTube channel here in the coming weeks as we approach the postseason. We got roughly a month left of the regular season. I think, regular season finales against OU at the Moody Center. Back end of the home and home series for Red River on the hardwood on March 8th. Yeah, anyway, for Andrew Miller, Shane Black, Morning Show, that's pretty much it. Welcome.
Welcome.